wanted to say thank you all for being here, because I've seen someone just walk in. You know, how could anyone walk in like be graceful when she walked in? Wearing a Kimberley pearl.
I didn't want to roll over that.
Oh, thank you, darling. I love it. I want to welcome you in, especially because all the hard work that you've been doing, and with all the people who've been around you and looking after everything for you, wherever you are, thank you very much. And I want to thank a lot of people. You know, I want to say a big hello to the Wananga Jar. They look after us as if, you know, we are the most special people in the world. Can we have a big clap for my someone who's been with me forever and a day, my beautiful niece from Tasmania. Give her a clap. Is there anyone I missed out? I know I missed out on you too. But that's life, because that woman is a wonderful girl, and I've known her for so long, and with you too, darling. And it's good to see the generations are all here as well, and that's what we want. That's what we want, to carry on the messages. The shirt I'm wearing today came from Darwin. It was the anniversary of the Stolen Generation, and it was great. But the work is never going to be finished for healing. We need so much of that to be happening. And we can always do the things what we're doing here today, and that's making it happen as well. So thank you, June Oscar. Thank you. Just leave your pearls somewhere for me. And welcome. Thank you ever so much for being here, June. Short and sweet like I am. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Jenkins, for welcoming us on your country, unceded. Thank you. And before I introduce June Oscar to speak, I just wanted to sort of set why we're here to talk about this research that has been released. I'm Elise Klein, an associate professor here at the Crawford School, and one of the co-authors of the research. But this research follows years and years of powerful work that's been led by June and many women in this room and online across the country. As part of the landmark and groundbreaking Yani Thangani report. And so in front of you, you have a one-page snapshot summary of the kinds of insights that this report, Caring About Care, highlights. But a couple of things that I just wanted to say. That hidden in plain sight, the ABS census clearly shows that Aboriginal women do more unpaid care work than any other group in the country, hidden in plain sight. And yet, this is something that's overlooked completely by policy. What the report does, as we get a bit deeper though, is to show how these definitions that the government often uses does not reflect the breadth of the work that has been done. Huge amounts of unpaid care work in communities across the country. And part of that, the care work is strength, but part of that care work is also responding to the ongoing and historic damage of colonisation that folks are having to mop up the mess of. So huge amounts of work being done. And so that is why a transformative approach is needed. And that is what today's discussion is about. So I also, just before June gets up and shares some initial reflections, I want to really thank the 100 women that contributed to this research from 5 places across this country. Thank you so much for your generosity and courage and bravery for all that you do, and for sharing the stories that you have so generously, so that this research could be here today. It wasn't possible without you. Thank you to the 5 Aboriginal controlled organisations that were so kind in letting us work with you. And also to my fellow co-authors, some in the room and some online. Thank you so much for all the work that you have done. So I now want to introduce Ani Junoska Aho, who's the founding chair of Yani, Thangani First Nations Gender Institute that's here now at the ANU, and the former Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Social Justice Commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Elise. Good day, all you women. The others that are watching and listening from afar through these devices. Yadara Yanange Nangio Moy, Matilda House. We are gathered here today on your country, Dr. Matilda House, the lands of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people. Thank you very much for hosting us and for welcoming us. Look, it is an absolute pleasure to be here with all of you today. Many familiar faces in the room, and I want to express my gratitude to Matilda House, Dr. Matilda House, for always turning up, welcoming, reassuring, guiding us through all of what it is that we share and report to each other on. And that support from someone so senior in the community is priceless, and we value absolutely your support for all of us. Thank you to those who are sharing with us online, tuning in online from all corners of the continent. It is important that we are here, taking the time out of our day to sit, to listen and to learn with open hearts and open minds, because that is what care work is about. As my team and I have heard through countless conversations with First Nations women since the beginning of Wiyi, Yani, Thangani, 7 years that project ran for, care is what keeps our world turning. For the non-Indigenous mob listening and listening in, I want to preface today's talk with our definition of care. Care is central to our lives, to our families, to our kin, to our country, to our communities. It is not an obligation or burden, although sometimes it does feel like that, but a value and responsibility to nurture, to plan and govern the generational health and well-being of our communities. Over generations, since our first mothers of this land, we have developed the vital knowledges to care, love, and safeguard our communities and our countries. Our care maintains social and ecological equilibrium, supports the healthy growth of babies, educates our children, and keeps our old people, our families and communities connected and strong in identity. So when we think about care work, it is big work. Our care has become even more vital with the ongoing impacts of colonisation, of growing inequalities and systemic discriminations. In the face of intergenerational trauma, poverty, poor health, and constant interventions from the child protection systems, the justice systems, the education systems, and other systems, we as First Nations women are continuously filling the gap. Not only has our care loads significantly increased, but it is constantly undermined by systems that are unresponsive and harmful, and that fundamentally do not meet our needs and those of our families and communities. We heard too many stories through the tears of women through the Yani engagements, of their personal experiences, of the treatment by the existing systems towards them. As I heard throughout Yani Thangani, and as you will read in this report, women are the primary carers for our children and our old people. That's not to say that our men folk aren't there. And those in our families with unique and additional needs. We open our homes to people rebuilding their lives from trauma, from violence and incarceration. We are the grief, loss, and deep listening counsellors to our families. Because these services sometimes are non-existent and do not appear on the landscape for many of us, far too many of us. We take family out on country for safety, connectedness, and to pass on our vital knowledges wherever we can. Then we go to work, running organisations and critical frontline services, underpaid and under-resourced, as well as attend local, regional and national conversations in the hope of shifting systems so our grandchildren and great-grandchildren can grow and thrive to be whoever they want to be. For all First Nations women, girls and gender diverse mob here today listening, I'm sure none of what I'm saying is unfamiliar. Care is the work we and our sisters, mothers and aunties do to keep our world turning. It is work that takes up the majority of our time, undervalued and unremunerated, and often contributes to our vulnerability and insecurity. This work often keeps us from paid employment and further education. It is work we pick up where there is no supports or services to assist, and where no respite is available. That is so true across this country. Regardless, though, we carry on. But we are tired, and we need to transform systems through care so that exhaustion doesn't take over. For the first time, the evidence of our care work has been elevated from the ground into a dedicated study. The Caring About Care research shows us that we must consider definitions of care for First Nations women as much more expansive, and complex than the mainstream definition of care. For too long, our work has been marginalised and devalued. As this research uncovers, it is estimated that the market value of our work in annual salaries between $81,175 to $118,921 per First Nations woman. Imagine the potential if this contribution to our economies was recognised and remunerated as it should be. Not only would our First Nations women and their families be supported and empowered to do this vital work, but our knowledges and practices of care would be elevated to respond to our nation's wicked problems of poverty, family violence, trauma, addictions, suicides, and cycles of incarceration. We know that when we invest in First Nations women, harms are reduced, children thrive, economies grow, self-belief and hope becomes real, and more just societies are introduced. I strongly believe it is our women's care that has the power to transform systems and reweave the social fabric of this nation. We must put care at the heart of policy design, and I look forward to exploring this topic more with our wonderful panel later on this morning. But before we do, I want to thank the Australian National University, the University of Queensland for this research. Elise Klein, Janet Hunt, Zoe Staines, Jonathan Dinko, Shay Brown, Kayla Glynn Braun, and Mandy Yap. Thank you for investing your time and energy in this work and for collaborating with the Wiyi Thangani Insitute. I really hope this work acts as a stepping stone for action that my team and I have been calling for through Wiyi Thangani, and to ground systems change work in a gender justice lens, recognising that creating an equitable social fabric starts with supporting women's rights and lives. So to all women involved in the research, and to First Nations women, girls, and gender diverse people everywhere carrying out the tireless work in keeping our families, communities, and countries safe and healthy, I see you and I thank you. And just finally, to our non-Indigenous collaborators, to government system actors, this research is a call to action to deeply listen and understand our lived experiences as First Nations women, to relearn and work with us to meaningfully respond to our care work, to transform systems and to rebuild our social fabric. So thank you very much, and thank you for this opportunity to speak. Yani?
Thank you, Annie Jean, such powerful words, and for saying them so, yeah, capturing so much in such powerful words. Thank you. And yeah, we're going to shortly invite a panel to come and reflect on some of the points that you raised. Before we do so though, Karina Norman was one of the collaborators for the research. Karina is a multidisciplinary artist and language advocate from the Darug and Darawal language groups around Sydney. And she's also part of the Tranby Women's Leadership Network. And she has recorded a short message. She couldn't be here with us today in person. And so we have a short message from her. And whilst that's playing, we might get our panel to come up. And June, Banok and
Baju Bujari, Nalawal, Namri Warangari Uranuruku, Nalawaji Nyanga Yago, Warami, Bujari Darabara, Tidrigura, Baju Bujari, Auntie Matilda and Auntie June. I acknowledge your leadership and wisdom which guide us all here today. Transformation begins with care, not only in Greater Sydney, but everywhere. In Greater Sydney, we are doing our best to hold everything together, despite the immense challenges we face. The dual burden of unpaid care work and paid employment is physically and emotionally exhausting. We are undervalued and unsupported by the systems that should be there to help us. What we need is culturally appropriate, trauma-informed services that meet the true needs of our communities. Programs like Tranby's work, including Yani, are already making a significant impact by empowering Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women through leadership and education opportunities. Policy reforms must focus on supporting and empowering women in leadership rather than undermining their efforts. By fostering trust and respect, these policies will enable leaders to implement changes that benefit the whole community. Intergenerational knowledge that maintains the balance between our Eora people and Nura country could guide governance and policy decisions to address the pressing issues like poverty, family violence, and mental health crises. Caring for others often means we put our own needs last. To transform systems, we must prioritise the well-being of First Nations women. Initiatives like Yanalangami and Sisters in Spirit create vital spaces for women to connect and heal. Reducing administrative burdens on First Nations-led organisations enables them to be actively involved and focus on the actual services that they're trying to deliver. Sustainable and long-term funding is also essential to ensure that they can provide consistent, culturally grounded care. We must also acknowledge the negative behaviours that too often arise that only serve to divide us. We truly grow through respect, sharing, and cultural exchange. We strengthen our community when we stand strong together. Transformation is through care and how we work together collectively to change the systems. By uplifting each other, we can achieve the change we all seek. No Bajgo towards lateral love. Didrigora, thank you. Yano.
So I just want to introduce our amazing panel that we're so grateful to have, and thank you for being here with us. Yani Reimer is an advisory member for Yani advisor for the advisory committee, drawing on many years of extraordinary work across the care sector, particularly around disability. So thank you for sharing your insights here. We also have Oscar and also Banok Rind, co-lead of the Yani Youth Thangani Insitute here at the ANU. thank you, all three of you, so much for offering to be part of it or accepting the invitation to be part of this question panel. Maybe to begin with an Reimer, if you don't mind me starting with you, reflecting on, I guess, June Oscar's commentary, but also Ani Karim's words. I'm just wondering if you could share a little bit around sort of drawing on all your expertise in the disability sector, particularly thinking about, you know, what it's like on the ground in doing the care work.
So thank you. So I'm a Gumbaynggirr woman from the North Coast, New South Wales. Thank you, June, for inviting us, and Matilda, thank you for your warm welcome, as always. And I'd like to acknowledge we're on country, so I just jumped in here, so I'm not really prepared. I've been in the industry a long time and been a carer myself. And I've worked in the care industry in my early days. So, you know, what I've seen, you know, particularly for our women, that happened, you know, always was that loss of self and loss of culture, particularly because of their caring duties. So, and particularly for our mothers, you know, caring for children, you know, with differences, as we would say, they lose a part of being connected in society always. They're not valued. They lose their cultural connections because first and foremost, they have to, you know, provide for that individual without any outside support. And I'd like to go back to also with the Disability Royal Commission that was held in Alice Springs a couple of years back, and the remote voices there from our mothers that, you know, came up and spoke was they were more likely to lose their child when they reached out to the system to get supports. And that is really sad indictment in this world. And then what happened, you know, what we heard from those children, some of the mothers never saw them again. So why would you reach out to a system that doesn't want to support you? And, you know, the words of Annie June is, you know, what we heard was, you know, we have such a strong sense of what is right morally. That's why we do this work, but we're not recognised. And the Western concept and narrative around what a caring role is looks really different in our communities. So, you know, working in the system for many years, we talk to mainstream services about when you walk into a house, there's actually most of the time not just one carer there. Because of cultural roles, everyone has a different role looking after that individual, whether it's an ageing elder or a child living with disability. But the Western concept has this framework about a caring role is only one person. So when you walk in a house and only talk to that one individual about what their support needs may need around caring, you're eliminating a whole cultural aspect. And for those individuals, it's disrespect first and foremost, but they walk away from that caring role sometimes. So we need to change the systems as in identifying that there may be many carers within that household or in a community that need to be reimbursed, because it's not about, you know, so as we know with the systems like with the carers allowance and that, it's how many hours. But we don't talk about hours in community. We talk about cultural connection and what you give to that individual on that daily or weekly, you know, interaction. Another conversation that, you know, I had many years ago was, you know, up in Tennant Creek, we met with a whole group of mothers talking about their caring roles. And at the end of the day, when we asked them, what do you want? And the Western construct is always about, well, I need a chair, I need a bed, or I need this. All of these mothers collectively said, we just want the person we care for to be loved and accepted. And that's the different thought processes. It's not about walking in and wanting something. So, you know, we need to change how we you know, understand what caring roles are in our community. And this is the work that's being done. And I'm so excited for it because we need to, you know, have that conversation. We need to break down those barriers. We need to change the narrative of what a caring perspective looks in a First Nations role of our mothers and extended families. You know, I know for myself individually, as the eldest granddaughter, I was, you know, that was my duty to take on those caring roles, you know, across the family. You know, it was just something that was ingrained for me from a young child, you know, and that's what we know and that's what we do without having, you know, a label put on, I'm a carer. It was just my role as the eldest granddaughter in that family. So I think, you know, this research and that is a long time coming. You know, I think it's amazing that, you know, it's being led by First Nations women and other collectives, comrades, as you know, we call them. You know, we need that. We need comrades to understand where we're coming from, because what we hear all the time, whether it's the census, whether it's, you know, benefits, whether it's services going out to our community, they don't really have a cultural underlay. They don't have a cultural understanding. They don't understand language. They don't understand roles. So, you know, we need this research to change the thought processes and the narrative away from that colonial concept of how a caring role looks. And first and foremost, as we know, you know, culture is number one, you know, for all our carers. It's about culture, how we do our work, but how do we support that and fund it appropriately, you know? It's, you know, I think it's a higher rate actually than that even, you know, if you put a price on what is culture and to keep, you know, build strong, resilient young people or supporting, you know, our older people not going into institutions. So, yeah, I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you. And thank you, yeah. Iris actually couldn't make it in the end today and you were put on the spot and that you are, yeah, I mean, just wow, thank you so much for sharing all of that insight.
Thank you.
But Banok, if you wouldn't mind me picking up on something Reimer just talked about just now around the problems of policy not even being able to see because it's so stuck in very sort of settler Western mainstream ideas of what care is. It completely overlooks just the huge amounts of care. And I agree with you. I think that dollar amount is very, very conservative, very underestimated. And so I'm just wondering if you could talk us through a little bit about like what that means for people on the ground, that the policy is completely missing what's going on.
Thank you, Matilda, for your beautiful welcome to your country. Thank you, June Oscar, June Reimer, and everybody else that's in the room today. It is beautiful. I'm Banok, I am June, and currently working at the Insitute with this amazing team. I think the constant issue and narrative that always comes up when it comes to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities is that constant issue of systems. And we're never going to have a system that's going to be for us because this system has been built to work against us. So what we do as our communities all over is we're trying our hardest to work against the system to make it work for us, for our communities. And when we're looking at policies, time and time again, there's been a history of racist policies that still exist today, especially when we're looking at care, when we're looking at child removal policies. But time and time again, these racist policies, they exist, and I just want to recognise the work of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women, gender diverse people, our men in our communities for advocating and standing up against the system that is so hard, that is so tough, especially as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. It affects our livelihood, and I think a perfect example of this as well is looking at the care work. Like June Reimer was just saying, if you look at it from the point of view as the Western point of view, they just see the carer as one. But for us, it's everybody that has a role in caring for each other. And on the Banok language, there's no one word for leader. I use this example all the time. It's everybody has their dedicated role to work together as a community and you look after one another. Even if you've moved away from your community or you live somewhere else, or even just our beautiful team that we work in, you know, in our ways of working, we always make sure that we do it in a way where we're working with each other and we look after one another, because the work that we're doing is a representation of what Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women and young girls and gender diverse people have told us what they wanted to see at the Institute. And the stuff about the figure and the money, truthfully, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community controlled sector is the most reported, audited sector in the whole country. And I think if you look at that, that within itself is, one, pretty racist. Two, is our mob are doing the work. We've always been doing the work, whether it's reported or unreported. We don't need to follow those official processes because we're there to take care of our communities and our family, and that's a hard thing that we do. And it's grounded by culture as well, as June was saying. But it is very conservative, as you said, and there needs to be a bigger investment, whether it's from government, whether it's from philanthropists, or whether we build our own sustainable funding models. And we've had Hanoi, we've had yarns about having sustainable income for First Nations women. But there's all these things that we need to consider when we're looking at care work and we're looking at our communities. But we'll never stop doing what we're doing because it's not just for the generation now, but for the next 7 generations.
Thank you. Awesome. Really, yeah. Maybe just to give a bit of background, that figure, that number value dollar amount only came as a way to, because some of the organisations we work with said, well, it might be useful to advocate for policy change by saying the value of what is being free rided on here. And so we came up with this I would say it's very, very conservative because it doesn't take into account, like what you said, how do you put a value on culture? Of course, it can't be reduced to this, you know, the monetary system, of course. But what it does do is point to, I think, a really important conversation about what is owed to Aboriginal women. Not like just in terms of service provision, but because the work is, you know, a lot of it is having to mop up the mess of the colonial system, what is owed. Yeah, but anyway, that's an ongoing conversation, of course. Annie, Jean, Oscar, on, you know, and your research has long showed, of course, the way in which women's work is invisible and marginalised, but also how, and I think in Yani Thangari's report originally shows extraordinary, like in such deep detail, how services and policies and institutions set up in the name of to help and to care actually make it harder for First Nations women. Whether it be the welfare system, child protection systems, justice systems, health systems. So can you talk us through, and yeah, I mean, just like the obstacles that they bring to transformation, and what are we talking about here when we are talking about transformation in, as Banok rightly points, in a colonial system?
Thank you. Yeah, important question. Look, many of us know that we are facing systems that are causing violence. So we can say it's systemic violence, racism and discrimination and inequality. What we are constantly bringing to those points of engagement with people who sit within these systems, that sit within these institutions, reminds us each and every time that we're stuck within systems that aren't working. that contributes bloody heartache when you're in the space of caregiving to multiple individuals and families within communities right across Australia. And we're reminded that these systems are broken, they need to change, and we need genuine dialogue with those who have influence in helping change how these systems and their processes respond to the truth and the reality of what is involved in caregiving in Australia of different families, First Nations families, non-Indigenous families, and in the multicultural sector as well. There's so much that happens that is out of sight, out of mind, and people are forced to just get on with it, which is the truth of many First Nations people. So these systems that uphold and continue to perpetrate violence, racism, and inequality, and we're reminded of the stakeholders, the actors within those systems, absolutely being out of touch with reality and the truth. We're reminded of this when we still hear people saying we ought to lock children up at 10 years of age. They're children, they're babies. Why isn't it that we can't see ourselves being a lot smarter and saying what we need is a therapeutic, preventative, caring response? But yet we are the actors that sit within these systems that quite happily want to perpetrate these harms and these discriminations against children who are traumatized, children whose families are traumatized, that are needing a different form of response to the reality of intergenerational trauma, of trauma inherited, trauma experience, early life trauma because of the lack of supports and access, because we may carry additional needs. That's the truth of what exists out there. And we have some of the country's smartest people working and engaging with our communities, and our communities finding other ways of carrying the narratives of that truth to those spaces and bringing in those actors and people of influence. But it's a real struggle. Well, why is it a real struggle? It shouldn't have to be. You know, the lack of investment into the social fabric of this nation is absolutely neglected. It is people that keep this nation going. Why is there, minuscule investment into the social needs of this country? You know, the investment into people. So, you know, we will continue to hear those horror stories of babies being imprisoned, incarcerated. We will continue to hear about deaths in custody. We will continue to hear of these failed responses and initiatives because we are not engaged with in the way that we ought to be in designing effective and responsive policy, legislation, systems, and ways of working. And this country lost an absolutely important opportunity when the naysayers said no to the voice. But 6 million people out there supported us in having input into designing the mechanism that would help inform Parliament and everyone in it to make the right decisions around public policy and how First Nations issues are responded to. A lost opportunity to the nation. So we continue the fight. We continue in other ways using different platforms until that window is open again. And people are continuing to do just that, to build relationships, to continue to elevate our voices in the areas of our priorities. And we have the processes of closing the gap, we have reconciliation and truth-telling efforts, but they will continue to be hampered because the nation remains deeply rooted in this violence and discrimination of systems towards First Nations people. Those well-meaning, good intention, fantastic people will continue to encounter on behalf of us all that injustice, and that fight gets harder and harder as we see and we bear witness to the ugly head of racism, of xenophobia, and all of those things that work against us being able to address how we can do things better and what it is that we don't tolerate as a nation. And I acknowledge Karen Mundy in the audience here today, leading in this space of the challenge of reconciliation. There's some fantastic work that Reconciliation Australia has been doing and continues to do, and the evidence that it's bringing around the positive side of what we've been able to learn from the missed opportunity of the failed referendum on the voice. So thank you for all that you do, Karen. It doesn't go unnoticed. So, and we need, back to your question, Elise, we need to address these challenges holistically, not piecemeal as they have been, recognizing that the issues we see across the sectors do not exist within a vacuum. What maintains this violence is the attitudes and behaviours, as well as the policies and the laws and the power dynamics and relationships that places this barrier down on our lives. When we start changing these systems, we see positive development across a whole range of areas. So, working holistically, and I think, the way forward is, it has started. It started with women across the continent telling us their lived experiences and aspirations for change. And in the Wiyi, Yani, Thangani report, the first time that First Nations women have been engaged with in over 36 years in the history of any national engagement and responses and recognition of First Nations women in this country. You know, the first time that was done is in the days of DAA, when the late Charles Perkin commissioned the Women's Business Report. You know, how shameful that's been. And being the first Aboriginal woman in the role of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Social Justice Commissioner, I wanted to mark that historic moment by engaging with as many First Nations women across this country and elevate their voices. It's the first time the Australian Human Rights Commission had done that. And the engagement took a strong human rights-based approach where I didn't identify what it is I wanted to talk to women and girls about. I asked them about what is it that you want to share with us, that we can help to elevate. What is it that contributes to your ability to achieve what you do achieve? Amazing. Or what are the barriers or you know, processes that undermines your right to continue to achieve? What is it that frustrates you? And what is it that you want to see changed? And who should be in that? And what should be your role? It's the first, you know, women said to me, this is the first time anyone's ever, you know, asked me, invited me to attend an engagement and asked me, what is it that's important to me that I want to talk to you about? There's always someone coming with an imposed agenda and say, oh, I just really want to talk to you about this or that, or, you know, A or B. Really, I don't really want to hear about that other stuff. But yet, who lives their lives in silos? Everything is interconnected. We are human beings. We care for generations of people. Somebody and a group of people cared for us. So we, you know, when we see care work, it is in its totality. It is seeing care work in its generational responsibility and gratitude for those who did care. So we have a collective responsibility to continue to elevate that truth, that reality, to get systems to change, that they're responsive to what care work looks like and what is needed in our lived realities, in our daily lives as people who live in this part of the world. And we can work together, we can bring that change. It's time. It's time. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
No, thank you so much. And you know, it was the report, but it was also the summit that you hosted here a few years ago. Sorry, in the city centre, and then of course the Institute. And I, you know, want to say how lucky the ANU is to be able to have the Institute here, and how much all of us need to continue to listen and to walk beside the extraordinary work that's being done at the Institute and will be done at the Institute. With the change agenda that has been laid out, that yeah, just the beginning. And thank you.
Well, thanks for mentioning the change agenda. It's the first time that First Nations women have been able to contribute through, firstly, you know, our report being tabled in the House, House of Reps in 2020. First time a landmark report elevating the voices of First Nations women and girls have ever been tabled in federal parliament. Then that was followed up by our implementation framework that then goes into detail around what women said and how we wanted to see the implementation of that report and its recommendations. And then we focused on the key priority areas in our change agenda. Now, just remind yourselves, there's been a, you know, gender equality movement in Australia for quite a long time. Where has the voices of First Nations women been in that process? So, you know, these are the voices in these documents that sets out clearly what First Nations women have said to us that we have put forward to, you know, those in influential roles that can help work with us in a different way to make a difference in the lives of all of our people. So, you know, we're looking forward to those partnerships so that we can bring meaningful change and to embed these within the systems so that it's not a continuous struggle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Time is not being our friend because I feel like this conversation is only just beginning here. And so, but we will have, there's some food and tea outside so we can continue the conversation for those of us in the room. Unfortunately, our friends online will have to wrap up shortly. But before I do, I do just want to hand over to Fiona Jenkins, someone that funded the research, which is getting harder and harder to do these days, unfortunately. So to the Gender Institute, thank you. But also the CBA for supporting this event particularly too. Fiona, do you want to reflect on...
I'll just say a couple of things. Yes,
Yeah.
so thank you so much. And I'm really, you know, first of all, delighted to see the new institute up and running. It's very, very exciting to have this fabulous new addition to our work at ANU. So welcome to the Feminist Network, and it's going to be really great to see how you expand and extend and improve on the work that we've been able to do here at ANU. So I'm really excited about that. I just wanted to say a couple of words about the funding that we provided. It was actually the first grant that we gave in a new initiative that we had called Working Group Funding, where we were really inspired, I suppose, by the experiences of COVID and all, you know, not least the questions about care that time raised for so many people. And we really wanted to start funding really big picture, you know, multidisciplinary, multi-institution kind of research that could do this really kind of important work that we've seen come out of that particular project. So congratulations, really warm congratulations on the report. I think it's a fabulous piece of work. And just listening to you, June, talk about this, you know, it makes me realise how much caring, we think of it very often in economic terms in a feminist way. You know, why isn't it better paid? I think those are all really important questions. But you also remind me that it's a very political act, I think, caring, that when we care about something, that's what motivates us to act and drive things forward and find a better way. So I think that's a really, you know, that's what I've taken from today, is this incredibly powerful statement about what care means, not just in economic senses, but in political senses, and for all of us in feminist movements. So thank you so much for reminding us of that and speaking to that today. I just, I won't stand between us and tea. Thank you everyone for coming, and this is a very exciting day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for being here. To Dr. Matilda, thank you again for having us here. To our amazing panel, thank you for all your deep insights, and for folks online, thank you for joining, and we hope that this is a call to action for continued work in this space. Thank you, everyone.